What's up guys, Roman from RNS Entertainment here, and welcome to Comic History, the weekly series where I provide you epic retellings and explanations of comic storylines, origins, and events. For the month of October, my Comic History episodes are all Halloween or horror themed, and so since I am a huge fan of the Young Justice comic series, this week we are going to be doing Young Justice Halloween, which is actually just the third issue of the Young Justice comic series. If you're interested in Young Justice, I highly recommend you also check out my Origin of Young Justice and Young Justice New Team Members episodes, which go over the creation of the team and the addition of the core female members, including Arrowette, who is going to appear in Season 3 of the animated series. Young Justice Halloween actually occurs directly before the new team members show up, and I've been waiting to cover it until October for obvious reasons. Our story begins on Halloween night, where while trick-or-treaters go door to door in search of candy, a strange coven of would-be magicians chant a nonsensical combination of vaguely magic-sounding terms and legalese lawyer jargon, attempting to combine magic rituals and technology to bring some new, unheard-of force forth from the multiverse. Getting a joint error message and hitting retry, a blast of lightning strikes their computers and fries the coven, with the 90s era printer spitting out a piece of paper with an image of a young Mr. Mxyzptlk, the fifth dimensional being who torments Superman until Superman can trick him into saying his name backwards and disappearing back into his realm, with the coven's ritual having broken a hole in space and time to summon him into the world. Peeling himself off the page, the young Mxy is notably different than the cartoonish Mr. Mxyzptlk who comically tortures Superman. He's for some reason logical and detached, and only cares about the scientific pursuits he can accomplish by studying life forms in our dimension. We then catch up with Young Justice, which at this point still consists of the original three members, Superboy, Tim Drake Robin, and Bart Allen aka Impulse, who have agreed to host a Halloween party for the local youth old enough to not be trick-or-treating. At the party, Robin is overwhelmed by the crowd, Superboy is bragging to girls about his trademark tactile telekinesis, and Impulse is everywhere, taking in the entire party at super speed. A cheerleader grinds up against Robin and starts to flirt with him, but Robin responsibly responds with a basic answer, which is a running theme throughout the series. Robin gets a lot of attention from ladies, but almost never reciprocates until Stephanie Brown starts coming around. The cheerleader turns out to have been flirting with Robin to make her football player boyfriend pay attention to her, and he immediately tries to get Robin to fight him, though Robin simply apologizes and walks off. With the football players laughing at Robin, Superboy gives the main one a superpowered high five, almost breaking his hand, and Bart takes all of his clothes at super speed, leaving him running embarrassed from the rec center. Meanwhile, we see that Red Tornado, who has become the de facto guardian and mentor to Young Justice in an attempt to regain part of his lost humanity, barrels through Chicago towards Treya, his adopted human daughter from before he was made into an android. Back at the party, Robin berates Superboy and Impulse for embarrassing the quarterback, which they thought he'd be thankful for them having his back. Robin first says that the parents of the town had trusted them to throw a safe party, and that they should be more responsible, and the conversation devolves into an argument between Robin and Superboy, with Superboy again insisting that he was sticking up for Robin, and Robin saying that it's insulting that they thought he couldn't handle it, and that Superboy only cared about how it reflected on himself as Robin's friend. During the argument, Impulse has become more and more distracted, eventually grabbing his two teammates and turning them towards the party, which has devolved into chaos, as Mr. Mxyzptlk has aged groups of them into old men and women, and is forcing others to dance violently and out of control, as Mxy calmly writes down their reactions and takes notes for his research. Seeing that Mxyzptlk is the cause, Superboy flies at him but is slammed to the ground by heavy weights that materialize on his legs, being made partially out of magic to affect him. As Robin works to pick the lock on the weights, Impulse runs up the wall and onto the ceiling, grabbing Mr. Mxyzptlk, who is more curious about them and their powers than anything, and slams him into a wall as Bart vibrates fast enough to phase through without harm. As Mxy pulls himself together, Robin finishes the assault by calling the Super Cycle, a new Genesis vehicle that we saw the Young Justice team unearth in part 1 of the series. Back in Chicago, Red Tornado's daughter Treya had stayed out late trick-or-treating, and is confronted by some older kids who demand she give them her bag and chase after her when she refuses. As the boys gain on her, Treya trips and falls, but is lifted up onto the broom of her witch costume by Red Tornado's wind powers, allowing her to fly and scare her pursuers into thinking she was an actual witch. At the party, Mxyzptlk slams his hand down on Young Justice and uses his fifth-dimensional reality warping powers to turn them into his fingers, demanding to know why they attacked him and claiming that he was only doing research and was going to turn everything back to normal as soon as he was done. Robin realizes that this version of Mxyzptlk has to be a younger version than the one who had gone against Superman in their past, pulled from earlier in his own timeline, and not having any knowledge of his future as a supernatural trickster. Seeing an opportunity to make things easier for Superman, Superboy tells Mxyz that in the future, his entire existence would be devoted to tormenting Superman with tricks and practical jokes, which young Mxyz says is pointless and something he's uninterested in. Turning young Justice back to normal, Mxyz promises that he'll never indulge in foolishness and will devote his entire life to nothing but knowledge and science. Before Mxyz leaves to go back to his own dimension, Robin tells him to wait, and as the boys and Mxyz go outside, they see that the entire world has seemingly been destroyed and is nothing but fiery volcanoes and wasteland as far as the eye can see. Robin and Mxyz quickly figure out that because Superboy had convinced Mr. Mxyzptlk to never become Superman's annoyance, the timeline as they know it had changed drastically and somehow resulted in everything being destroyed. Robin tells Mxyz that he had to change his mind and decide to torment Superman, who he hadn't even met at this point, over and over forever. Meanwhile, right before the timeline changes, Red Tornado flies to his daughter, who says that her mom and Red Tornado's former wife had said that he wasn't coming back and didn't feel as if he could be human anymore. And Tornado tells her that Halloween is a day to pretend that you are what you are not, and that he wants to try and be there for her. As he's telling her that he wants to see what the limits of his robotic existence and what that means for his relationship to her are, the world suddenly becomes the nightmarescape that Young Justice had accidentally caused it to become, and Tornado immediately decides that the boys must have had something to do with this. Meanwhile, Young Justice sits Mxyzptlk down and has him watch a ton of episodes of The Three Stooges, waiting to see if it would trigger some natural inclination to being the Mr. Mxyzptlk the world apparently needed. Eventually, Mxyz cracks up laughing and rolls on the floor, with his appearance changing to become the older, goofier version that Superman had met. Mxyzptlk makes fun of the kid running the projector, pokes him in the eyes, and puts his arms around Young Justice, telling them that they're the greatest, and had opened his eyes to a new world of pointless stupidity. Mxyz shocks Impulse with a joy buzzer, and is then punched in the face by Superboy, who he simply thanks and promises that whenever he meets Superman, he'll give it to him bad in honor of Young Justice. Running outside to see if the world had been fixed, the boys run into Red Tornado and also find that the entire immediate area has been replaced with a Mxyzptlk themed amusement park. But other than that, things were back to normal. Robin facepalms but says they honestly got off lucky. And that wraps up Young Justice Halloween, the third issue of Young Justice and the third Young Justice episode we've done so far, with the new team members video happening right after this one in continuity. As for issue number 2, I don't think I'm ever going to bother covering it, as it's really just offensively bad, and only results in Young Justice discovering that the Super Cycle is from New Genesis, and Bart Allen getting a favor from a rich, somehow Jewish sheik. As for the Halloween issue, it's a fun throwaway story that helps establish the self-referential and over-the-top tone of the series, and actually retconning in that Young Justice was the cause of Superman's conflict with Mr. Mxyzptlk, which never affected anything and was never referenced again. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Comic History, which along with all of the episodes in October are Halloween or horror themed in honor of the season. So make sure you check out the Marvel Zombies Halloween from last week, and if you want to learn more about Young Justice in the comics, check out those episodes in the Teen Titans Young Justice History playlist on my channel. If you enjoyed this video and want to help me make more great content for you guys, make sure to give it a thumbs up, leave me a comment, subscribe to RNS Entertainment, and if you want to help support the channel, consider donating to our Patreon, which can get you cool rewards like extra history and rant videos that won't be going on YouTube, the ability to commission any history or character spotlight video you'd like to see that month, and more. Thanks to Drew Miles for being a $10 patron this month, and I will see you all next time.